think we are going to get going. Sorry about the delay again, everyone. And I will be promoting panelists throughout. So if there's any issues, just, write in the chat. So thank you everybody for coming to Conservation Conversations. My name is Bridget Sanderson. I am the director with Environment Missouri, based out of Kansas City. And we're so happy to be talking about the Great American Outdoors Act today. Kate, I'll let you take it away.
Great, thank you, Bridget. And thank you again, everyone, for your patience. This world of virtual interaction poses new challenges every day. So thank you for being so flexible and patient. I'm Kate, I'm with Environment Maryland, and Conservation Conversations was sort of born out of the idea that in this time of sheltering in place and keeping social distance, we wanted to allow people the opportunity to still connect with each other and engage with topics around conservation and nature that maybe you've never had the time to think about. For this particular episode of Conservation Conversations, we're focusing on the Great American Outdoors Act because it just seemed, all of our episodes up until this point have been on the healing benefits of nature, the importance of protecting our resources. And so this is just, it felt like such a natural combo to focus on this. So for our guests who are on normally, there's a little bit of a change because of how many guests we had who wanted to come on and talk about this. We are not going to do live questions like we normally do. If you have questions, put them in the chat in Zoom or on Facebook, and our staff will answer them. But otherwise, we were not going to read out the live questions. Again, thank you for being here. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our Conservation Program Director, Steve Blackledge, who's going to tell you more about this critical legislation.
Thank you, Kate. And I'm happy to do so. And thanks for having a whole discussion on this. Well, let me just start with the obvious, which is Americans love public lands. They love outdoor places, and they always have. And there's something special about getting into the great outdoors. It's good for your spirit, and it's good for your health. And that's whether it's something completely like a national park like the Grand Canyon or a wildlife refuge, or if it's just your local park in your local community. And the Great American Outdoors Act puts these values, the love of the outdoors, front and center by investing in conservation. And if it passes, through Congress, it will create a steady, consistent funding level for conservation of $900 million a year for a behind-the-scenes program called the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And even though this program has been behind the scenes, going all the way back to the Lyndon Johnson administration when it was first signed, it's done so much for our country. It's funded conservation efforts in the Grand Canyon, the Great Smoky Mountains. It's funded it in national forests and wildlife refuges, but state parks, state public lands, local parks throughout the U.S. In addition, the Great American Outdoors Act does another thing in addition to funding the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and that's it creates a short-term burst of funds, $9.5 billion to, in part, not fully, but to in part address the long-ignored maintenance problems in our national parks and public lands, like falling down buildings, crumbling buildings, trails in need of maintenance, and more. This thing has been wildly popular. Well, the outdoors are wildly popular with the public. This thing has been wildly popular in Congress. So on June 17th, the Senate passed the Great American Outdoors Act in a wonderfully bipartisan fashion. The vote was 73 to 25. The House leadership has said they will take it up in late July. And we really hope Congress can get this thing across the finish line. And we really need it. We need to get it across the finish line. America's losing the equivalent of 2 football fields of space every minute. We've lost almost 30%. There are 30% fewer birds in the skies in North America now than there were in 1970. And habitat is a big piece of that. And we simply need to do better on this front. And the Great American Outdoors Act is part of that, part of the solution, and part of doing better.
Great, thank you so much, Steve. So we have a stacked lineup this evening. We're going to start with our State Director in Environment Colorado, Hannah Collazo, and she is going to be talking a little bit about the importance of LWCF and the Great American Outdoors Act in Colorado, and then introducing a special guest.
Great, thank you so much, Kate. I appreciate you and Bridget pulling this together, and Steve for joining us. Actually just today led a press conference with Congressman Crow. So we have some LWCF champions in Colorado, which is exciting. LWCF is incredibly important to Colorado, especially now. We have seen access to public land increase by over 40% in just March alone, with about 875,000 people accessing these lands in March, and that went up to over 1 million in April. Public lands in Colorado has played a significant role in my life. I would, pile in the van, drive from Houston, Texas, take the scenic route, and we would land in Creede, Colorado, where we would camp off the grid on Colorado's public land. And here I am a couple decades later advocating for funding that would protect those same lands I was camping on couple decades ago. So it is my honor to introduce Congressman Neguse. He has always been a leader, whether it's whether it's the CORE Act or circulating a letter sent to House Appropriators signed by over 60 colleagues that were advocating for the full funding of LWCF. It is my honor to introduce him. He represents Colorado's 2nd District. So Congressman, you can take it away. I don't see you, but hopefully you're here.
Oh, can you see me now?
Great, now I can see you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you too. Well, thank you for that kind introduction. And of course, thank you to everyone for joining tonight. Sorry that I couldn't be with you all for a longer period of time. I'm actually here in Washington, DC. We are just about to take a vote on the House floor in a few short minutes on a really important police reform bill that many of you may have been following. But I'm so excited to be with you to talk today about this incredibly important topic and something that I'm so passionate about, which is protecting our public lands for future generations. I represent Colorado's 2nd Congressional District, which happens to be the most beautiful congressional district in the United States. For those who have been there, they can attest to that fact. 52% of my district is federal public lands. And so when we think about the impact that the LWCF and the Great American Outdoors Act can have on public lands and treasured wild places across our country, it's hard to overstate the impact that it will have, and in particular in places like my district, like Rocky Mountain National Park, where just last 2 years ago, $8 million worth of an investment as a byproduct to LWCF was brought to bear to help address some of the real maintenance backlogs that a previous panelist had described, right? The deferred maintenance that exists in so many of these different areas. At the end of the day, for me, I think about it through the prism of being a young father. My daughter, Natalie, is 2 years old, and I look forward to being able to take her on hikes in Rocky Mountain National Park, just as my dad took me on those very same hikes. And that really, for me, fundamentally is what it's all about, is preserving these incredible places so that future generations can continue to have the same access that we've had. So grateful to be here, grateful to be among so many champions for environmentalism and protecting our planet.
Thank you so much, Representative. It is such an honor to hear from you and to hear, the reasons why this is so important to you. We know that you're incredibly busy in DC, and we're just so grateful for you taking the time. Thank you again for being here. Hannah, is there anything else you wanna add for the representative?
No, I'm just proud to be from Colorado. There's so many public lands champs here in the state. So.
Well, thank you all, and again, keep up the great work, and continue to lift your voices and the voices of so many others in support of these important conservation efforts. So, thanks so much.
Great, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. So our next featured guest tonight, I am so excited to introduce because he is from Maryland. Albert Arevalo is the DC, Maryland, Virginia program coordinator with Ladino Outdoors. He is passionate about making services accessible to everyone, particularly minorities and low-income communities. Albert has worked alongside colleagues and organizations that align with his moral compass, and from connecting youth to their local parks to leading a regional litter campaign in DC, Albert is dedicated to improving the quality of life of the individuals that he works with. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Albert, to talk a little bit about why protecting our public lands is so important to you and your work.
Thank you for the invitation. Actually, as the representative was talking about Colorado, I reflected about my personal visit to the Rocky Mountains, and it took my breath away in more ways than one. It was my first time in Colorado, so actually having the deficit of oxygen was eye-opening, and it really was a pretty remarkable experience. But it actually made me reflect on something that I'm also passionate about, is kind of making people like myself, people that look like me, more visible in spaces like that. So I actually grabbed my passport, as the representative was talking about, because a personal mission of mine is really to kind of introduce people to the national parks and kind of collect these stamps as they visit some of the best historical markers all over the U.S., the continental U.S., the territories. It's absolutely beautiful. And as Kate had mentioned, I am with Latino Outdoors. I'm the program coordinator for the greater Washington area. I'm actually a native from Texas. So as Hannah was mentioning, kind of driving from Houston to Colorado, I'm very familiar with the routes. I'm actually from Border City in South Texas. So public lands has always been in my repertoire. I think within Latino Outdoors, we really value the importance of building community, and we build community in the outdoors. And we do it in many ways, whether it's hiking, whether it's like picnicking, whether it's celebrating a milestone of ours in the outdoors. I think it's important for us to, be visibly represented in the outdoors, so we can advocate for it internally as well, and kind of bring in more people to support some of these important legislations. I also was reflecting on the LWCF. President Johnson actually is an alumni from my university at Texas State. Used to be Southwest Texas State. I think it was Normal College or Teachers College. It's been through so many changes in names, so it's hard to keep up with. So it's a really great legacy to be a part of President LBJ's kind of like continuing like message of the importance of public lands. I'm proud Texan, I'm proud outdoorsman. I enjoy the outdoors, and I think within our community in Latino Outdoors, we span the diaspora of Latinos and Latinas and Latinx folks from all corners of the globe. Whether you're first generation or you're recent immigrants, public lands is what really kind of makes the U.S. So I think that's something that we really value, and visible representation kind of stays at the forefront in our mission and telling our stories, because Latinos have been part of the fabric of the U.S. since before the U.S. became the U.S. The Southwest definitely comes to mind, and my home state as well. So Latino Outdoors really, supports LWCF. I think the importance of preserving this steady flow of funding is vital for the creation of public lands, because the National Park Service in their centennial report back in 2016, they had mentioned that nearby nature is probably more important than the Grand Canyons, these bigger parks. Not that they're not important, but I also happen to live in Washington, D.C. And in D.C., Anacostia Park is probably one of the most accessible parks for district residents. So if you can't access your local park, how can I entice you to protect other parks in all over parts of the country? So a big part of our mission is really to connect people to the outdoors, especially something that's in your backyard. I think the silver lining of the pandemic has, spurred a lot of interest for, new birders, people outside, just, enjoying the outdoors. And there is a multifaceted approach to the outdoors. It's not just a beautiful venue to take pictures and selfies and, geolocate and whatnot, but it really is therapeutic. I think that's something that I can personally attest to has helped with my mental health and physical health. That's something that I enjoy. I just got back from a good walk with my dog. So if you hear chitter chatter in the back, that's definitely him. And you know, he and I have definitely enjoyed just like being outside. And that's something that, you know, we value a lot, is that we're able to kind of go to the outdoors, and despite barriers that we see, we overcome them. And we can't overcome them if we don't have partners like you all. So I really appreciate the opportunity to loan the voice of myself and then speak on behalf of Latino Outdoors. LWCF has been, you know, vital for creating parks in communities like my own. It's something that I hope more funding continues. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Albert. That was amazing. Thank you for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Alex Peterson to do our next intro.
Hey everyone, I'm conservation advocate for Environment America here in DC, and I've been largely focused on the Land and Water Conservation Fund. I think one thing that's really striking about the bill that's being considered in Congress right now is, as Steve mentioned, it's really bipartisan. People on both sides, everyone just loves the outdoors, and things like taking care of our national parks are hugely popular with the public at large. So there's 12 original co-sponsors of the Great American Outdoors Act in the House, 6 Democrats, 6 Republicans. And one of those Republicans is Representative Steve Stivers. He couldn't be here for this time, so he sent us a video. Check it out.
So,
In a sec.
funny moment here. Bridget, as the host, you need to enable screen sharing or share the video yourself.
We have a video.
We do have a video.
Sorry about that.
It's
Forgot
gonna
about that,
happen.
and I don't have the video pulled up, so.
I can share screens, I think.
Sorry guys, give me 1 second.
Oh, and then if I can fill space while Bridget is digging that up, what Alex said is true. It was 6 Republicans, 6 Democrats on the when it was introduced, but the previous version of a bill that was just funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund had a majority of the House on it, and it had so many members, obviously from, well, not obviously, but it had great bipartisan support. So this issue has been, through the decades, going back to LBJ, so much support from both sides of the aisle. And Bridget, I'll say one more thing, and if you're still, yep, okay. Even before LBJ signed this in September of '64, JFK was campaigning for it while president. And even before that, President Eisenhower had created a commission that came up with the idea of this. So its roots are definitely deep in history and always have been bipartisan.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. Minor technical difficulties.
Hi, this is Congressman Steve Stivers, and I'm proud to celebrate with you a major milestone for the Great American Outdoors Act, the historic passage on a hugely bipartisan basis in the United States Senate, and the introduction on a bipartisan basis in the House. I'm proud to be one of the original co-sponsors. You know, I represent Ohio's 15th Congressional District, which has some of the most beautiful places on earth, the Wayne National Forest and the Hocking Hills, which I hope you'll all take some time and go to. During my time, I've always been a huge supporter of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and it's time we make the funding permanent. You know, it's a great example of how environmental stewardship can go hand in hand with resource management, conservation, and recreation, and I'm excited to getting this done. Looking forward to working with you to make that happen. You know, as an Eagle Scout myself, the outdoors has always had a great place in my heart, and I look forward to getting this bill passed the House and signed by the President. Thanks for everything you're doing and your advocacy, and good luck as we move forward. Again, I'm Congressman Steve Stivers, and let's get this thing passed.
All right. So just for all of our guests who are on, there were a couple committee votes scheduled sort of at the last minute, but the representatives who are the original co-sponsors care deeply enough about the Great American Outdoors Act that they took their time to send us these videos so that they could make sure their voice was heard on here. So now it's again my pleasure to introduce our Environment New Mexico State Director, John Ahmanson.
Hey everyone, and thanks so much to Kate for that introduction. Like she said, my name is John Ahmanson, and State Director with Environment New Mexico. We've worked a lot in recent years to help win protections for the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument and other public lands. And so we're just elated that our state and country are on the doorstep of another monumental conservation victory with the Great American Outdoors Act. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is flanked on both the east and the west by the gorgeous Sandia Mountains and the striking volcanoes of Petroglyph National Monument. And I spend as much time as I can hiking and running and biking through these places, and I feel very thankful to live in a place that has such immediate and access to such wonderful outdoor places. And both of these areas, the Sandias and Petroglyph National Monument, are cherished by the people of Albuquerque and New Mexico as a whole, and they both received funding through the LWCF. And so driving down I-25 to Las Cruces, which is the home of our next speaker, LWCF funded sites are really everywhere you look, whether it's the Valle de Oro National Wildlife Refuge, Seviena National Wildlife Refuge on the other side of the road, and even the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument itself. And speaking of Las Cruces and the Organ Mountains, I'm absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to introduce our next speaker, Representative Xochitl Torres Small of New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District. Representative Torres Small has been a steadfast advocate for Southern New Mexico's public lands since she took office, and actually introduced the Great American Outdoors Act to help protect the Land of Enchantment's treasured public lands and help address the maintenance backlog of places like Carlsbad Caverns and White Sands National Parks. The Congresswoman has also could not join us in person tonight, but has recorded a video speaking as to why New Mexico's public lands and the Great American Outdoors Act are so important to her. And I'll turn it over to her.
Sorry, you guys. Technology, sometimes I've got too many things going on. So give me just one more second.
We are unable to hear, Bridget.
Well, I'm sorry that I can't join you live today, but I appreciate the opportunity to participate in the Conservation Conversations webinar on the importance of the Great American Outdoors Act. As we've all worked to adapt and respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, we've been forced to come up with new routines that both keep us safe and heal us. On the toughest days, I know I can find solace and peace in Southern New Mexico's public lands. Some of my fondest memories were formed on New Mexico public land. From the first time my parents told me I was old enough to hike the Organ Mountain Needles in 5th grade, to exploring the Uvas on horseback and finding petroglyphs with my husband. We've always needed our public lands. They boost our economy, they connect us to the generations who came before us, and they provide an opportunity to relax and marvel and learn about our natural world. As we work to rebuild our country and heal from this pandemic, we've never needed our public lands more. We need smart legislation that prioritizes infrastructure, invests in our public lands, and supports job creation. I've worked closely with leaders on the ground and my colleagues in Congress to introduce the Great American Outdoors Act in the United States House of Representatives. This bill will protect our public lands, fix our crumbling roads and overgrown trails, support access to hunting spots, and create new jobs and opportunities. Most importantly, this historic bipartisan legislation will permanently and fully fund the Land and Water Conservation Fund, one of our nation's most successful conservation programs. Created by Congress in 1965 with strong bipartisan support, LWCF uses revenues from oil and gas produced offshore to support the conservation of our land and water. Every year, $900 million of royalties is put into this fund, intended to create and protect national parks, forests, monuments, and wildlife refuges, and provide matching grants to state and local parks and recreation projects. Every state and 98% of counties nationwide benefited from the LWCF project. LWCF has touched the lives of southern New Mexicans, funding projects like the Spring River Park and Zoo in Roswell, Las Cruces Baseball Complex, Lower Tanzil Dam Recreation Area in Carlsbad, City of Rock State Park in Grant County, and the Rock Hound State Park in Deming. Fully funding LWCF will bring these projects into our communities, and it's necessary for projects like restoring access to one of my favorite trails in the Oregon Mountains, Achenbach Canyon. LWCF provides vital access to public lands for our communities, from local parks in the middle of cities to national forests preserving wilderness. These give families more opportunities to recreate and enjoy our outdoors. Outdoor recreation in New Mexico also supports the economies of both urban and rural communities, generating $9.9 billion annually and supporting over 99,000 jobs. While LWCF was permanently reauthorized last year, the exact amount of funding used in LWCF's projects continues to be determined by Congress's annual appropriations negotiations and is always much lower than the full $900 million. This leaves countless projects unfunded and our land and water unprotected. By fully funding LWCF, the Great American Outdoors Act ensures that funding is used as intended, investing in our public lands. The Great American Outdoors Act also helps address a critical backlog of maintenance needs across the nation's public land system. With an estimated $19 billion in deferred maintenance, we've allowed our public lands to degrade for far too long. By investing in these deferred maintenance projects, we'll make critical investments to repair, maintain, and update infrastructure at places like New Mexico's national parks, Carlsbad Caverns, and White Sands National Park, both of which are in the district, as well as national monuments and forests around the country. I know that many of you have been longstanding supporters of LWCF and our public lands, and I appreciate your support. With your help, we've built an amazingly broad bipartisan coalition. Last week, the Senate voted to pass this bill, and the House has announced its intention to vote on the legislation in July. With support from President Trump, it finally seems like this law will become a reality. I'm proud to be a leading voice supporting the Great American Outdoors Act and will continue to fight to get this bill over the finish line. Thank you.
All right, that was wonderful. So I will be introducing our next advocate, who is a local Missourian. He's on the other side of the state from me. So I'm very excited. I'm incredibly excited that we were able to finally meet up. You know, I've lived in Missouri or Kansas, just right next to Missouri, a majority of my life. And so, you know, I always grew up going to the Ozark National River Scenic Way. So yeah, LWCF is huge for recreation in Missouri. And I'm really excited to introduce our next guest. He is an advocate. Nadav is the founder of Gateway to the Great Outdoors, an environmental nonprofit that provides outdoor, environmental, and STEAM, that's science, technology, engineering, art, and math, education to low-income students in St. Louis and Chicago. And I will let him take it away.
Hello. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on tonight. It's such an honor to speak with everyone who is on this panel. So thank you. I think this bill is very important in securing public lands, not only in the wilderness and in national parks, but also in urban areas. In addition to starting GGO, I also do a lot of research on the health impacts on nature contact, specifically in urban low-income youth. And the findings are so significant, from increasing environmental awareness and perceptions of the environment, and creating people to fight for the environment and care about bills like this, to promoting health-related quality of life, as well as promoting science engagement and awareness. So the influences of nature contact is so important, and you see that both with the research that we do, but then also just with the students. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the students that we work with really haven't left a 5-block radius of their school and home. So a lot of them have not really engaged before the program with nature and even with the urban parks. I mean, one of our schools in Chicago is a 30-minute walk from Lake Michigan, and a third of our students had never been to Lake Michigan until our program. So while this bill is such a monumental moment and so exciting, it's really important that we think about equity and access to the outdoors and how to make sure that we provide equitable access to the outdoors, whether it's through education, or in Seattle, they have public transit that goes to hiking trails, and really engaging the public in it's really important. And also on that note, there is always the risk of green gentrification. So it's really important to, while doing these urban green parks and such, working with community stakeholders and doing stuff like focus groups and photo voice analysis in order to really make sure that while providing these nature green spaces, we're giving the community really what they want so that they can engage in nature, what best fits their community.
Thank you so much. And I can't wait for us to work in Missouri together in the future. So
I'm so happy that we connected.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so next up, we will have our Environment California Director, Dan Jacobson, on next.
Hey all, thanks so much for having me. I hope you can hear me. Perfect. My name is Dan. I'm the Director of Environment California, and I'm to introduce a quick video by Congressman T.J. Cox, who is an original co-sponsor and locally from California. So he really knows what he's talking about. There's very few states that will benefit as much from the passage of this legislation as California, from our national parks, which are world famous, to our local parks that include where we play baseball, soccer, go for bike rides, and sometimes just hang out and enjoy what is beautiful California nature. And as a lobbyist, and I've been doing this for a long time, really one of my general rules is to never really disagree with a member of Congress. But in this case, Hannah, I hope you can pass on my slight disagreement with your member of Congress. He might think the 2nd District in Colorado is the best. Actually, factually, the best is in California. It's any one of the 53 congressional districts that we have here, whether it's the Craggy Coasts or the sandy beaches that are world famous, whether it's from Death Valley to Mount Whitney. We really have some of the greatest and biggest and best that there is, some of the oldest trees, some of the largest trees, and people in California know it, and people come really from all over the world to participate in that. We're thrilled to introduce this video from Congressman Cox. We're thrilled that he's an original co-sponsor, and we're really thrilled to be working with so many different coalition partners here to get this important bill passed. So I'll turn it back to my friends who are running Conservation Conversations and let them do their thing. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Dan. You know, nothing better than a public lands fight.
I mean, while Bridget gets the video teed up to share her screen, Hannah, I mean, any response to that?
Sadly, we're out of time.
I'm speechless.
All right, here is Representative T.J. Cox's video.
Hi, it's Congressman T.J. Cox from California's 21st District here. Our public lands are some of our nation's most valuable resources, our real treasures, and I'm proud to introduce legislation to fully and permanently fund the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Now, our companion bill in the Senate is set to receive a vote soon, and that's going to bring it one step closer to becoming a law. And I'm working hard to make sure that this critical legislation makes it across the finish line. It's vital that we address our parks maintenance backlog and find permanent funding so more of our beautiful parks and outdoor recreation areas like Kings Canyon, Sequoia National Park, the Bixley National Wildlife Refuge, Heritage Park Lemoore, and the Hanford Sports Complex can continue to serve so many of us with shared space that everyone in the Central Valley can enjoy. Thanks so much.
Hey everyone.
Listed out a few of them. Sorry, in that of Dan of the beautiful places California has to offer. Alex, I'm going to let you intro your next video.
Yeah, so I'm very excited to queue up the next video. This is going to be from Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. He's been hands down one of the best advocates on this issue. He was lead sponsor of the bill last year to fully fund the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And he and Corey Gardner introduced the great bipartisan compromise that is the reason we're all here today, the Great American Outdoors Act. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce a video from Senator Joe Manchin.
Sorry, yeah, guys.
I'm Senator Joe Manchin. It is a privilege for me joining you in today's Conservation Conversation, hosted by Environment America. Last week, the Senate passed the Great American Outdoors Act to permanently fund the Land and Water Conservation Fund at $900 million per year and to provide $9.5 billion to address the backlog on our national parks and other public lands. The House of Representatives is scheduled to take up the bill next month. And given the strong bipartisan support for this bill, I am hopeful the President will be able to sign it into law shortly afterwards. Every single state, the territories, and almost every county in our country have benefited from LWCF funding, including 54 of the 55 counties in my home state of West Virginia. The Land and Water Conservation Fund is responsible for some of our most cherished outdoor spaces all across the country. Since 1965, $243 million has been used to enhance recreation and conservation in the Mountain State alone. The Great American Outdoors Act will also increase access to federal lands for hunting and fishing by helping provide new access points to everyone who can enjoy the recreational areas. I've been a hunter my entire life and also enjoy fishing. It's a part of my life that I've enjoyed with my kids. Now my son takes his kids. With this bill, we'll be able to pass down the legacy of protecting and enjoying our irreplaceable outdoors for generations to come, and that's something we can all be proud of. The Great American Outdoors Act also makes an overdue investment in deferred maintenance of our national park system and other federal lands. Combined, these agencies have a backlog of deferred maintenance projects totaling over $21 billion nationwide. The Great American Outdoors Act will ensure our national parks, forests, and other federal lands are well taken care of and remain accessible for everyone to enjoy, all the while creating jobs when we need them most. Passing the Great American Outdoors Act is an investment in our nation and our future generations, and will ensure our children and grandchildren can enjoy the wild and wonderful outdoor spaces of America for decades to come. It is a shining example of bipartisanship and how the great outdoors brings people together, and I look forward to this bill becoming law in the near future. Thank you.
So I am from Southwest Virginia, about 45 minutes from the West Virginia border. So a lot of the public land out there is something I grew up with. I got to hear everybody talk about Colorado and Texas, and now I have to get in my plug for Appalachia. So if anybody is attending right now from Appalachia, put in the chat. And it is now my pleasure to introduce another state director. Doug O'Malley is the Environment New Jersey State Director. He is going to introduce our next video, and I have, in my time here, have already learned a lot from Doug, and he is just such a wonderful person to have on. So Doug, I'm going to let you take it away.
Super. Thank you so much, Kate. I'm sorry I'm having a little trouble with my video right now, but I'm so excited to be joining you. And as you may be able to hear, my kids are hounding me right now, as you can tell, because we are on the process of going to the Great American Outdoors. So I'm headed with my family, my daughter Elsa 7.5 and Malcolm 4.5, and Katie, my wife. We're headed to spend time with family in a national a national park or national forest, the White Mountain National Forest up in northern New Hampshire. And so this is kind of a reminder that, you know, in this time of COVID, right, you can practice social distancing, you can get outside and flatten the curve and enjoy our great American outdoors. Now, obviously, we had a little debate on kind of what was the best district, and I'm happy to say that no one does districts better than Better Know a District, which was obviously Stephen Colbert's shtick before he was on the Late Show. And Stephen Colbert is a proud member of New Jersey 11th District and also shares a hometown, Montclair, New Jersey, with Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill. And unfortunately, the Congresswoman can't join us tonight, but she did join us this fall in Morristown, which again is part of the great New Jersey 11th. Morristown is definitely one of the places that George Washington slept. It was actually a key location for one of Washington's forts. And it's also a location for a county park that has gotten land and water conservation funds in the past. And so we did a massive hike in Morris County in this particular park right before Thanksgiving with the Congresswoman. And it was just an incredibly great experience to remind us the places we love in our neighborhoods and in our state, which we are using so much right now as we're flattening the curve, have been helped be preserved by the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And I also just want to reference here before we tee up the video by the Congresswoman. The Congresswoman is a freshman. She just started. She was a Navy pilot, and she's kind of a self-described kind of average person that wanted to get into politics. And this is a reminder that preserving the great outdoors is something that everyone cares about. And there are incredibly beautiful places in New Jersey. We have the southern Pinelands, which is 1.1 million acres. And we also have national parks right in our cities. So everyone talks about Hamilton, the musical. Well, Hamilton partially got started in Peterson. It's the home of the Industrial Revolution. And we have the Great Falls in Peterson, which Congressman Pasquale fought to make a national park. These are the places that we need not only protect, but to fund. So with that, let's cue it up to hear from Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill.
Hi everyone, this is Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill. I'm sorry I can't be with you tonight for conservation conversations, but I'm so happy for your engagement and involvement in this critical issue. I'm proud to tell you that I led the Great American Outdoors Act, which will make the Land and Water Conservation Fund permanent in the House of Representatives. It's a great bill that really supports so many areas of our state. It's the most densely populated state in the nation, so we know how important it is to conserve our outdoor spaces and protect our drinking water. Thank you again for all of your hard work and efforts for engaging in this conversation, and I hope to see you soon.
Okay, I have the pleasure of sort of summarizing some of those wonderful videos and other speakers. And let me just say this, the politics are very much on our side. We have Republicans, we have Democrats, we have independents who are all supportive of investing in the Great American Outdoors Act. That is great. The key thing for us is that Congress actually do and get this across the finish line. We all care so much about the Great American Outdoors. We've heard from speakers about how it's good for our spirits, our souls, our mental health, our physical health. It is really important. And from Doug O'Malley, who was on the call, driving to a national forest, but just getting to your local outdoor park. And the thing that is really remarkable is when I've started to look at local parks where I grew up, where I live now, the bicycle trail that I was out on today, you just find that so many of these things are funded by the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which again is sort of this little engine that could, behind the scenes federal program that now for the first time will be fully, if the Great American Outdoors Act passes, for the first time this program will be fully funded and won't have to be subject to the annual budget fights in Congress. So that would be a steady $900 million a year. Plus this big pot of money, it's short term, but a big pot of money over 5 years to address the long overdue maintenance problems in our national parks and other public lands. It's a big, big historic victory. Senator Manchin, who was on the video earlier, called it one of our most important, if we get this, one of the most important conservation victories in the last 50 years. And you know, I always have the hyperbole alert ready, like, oh, that's an overstatement or whatever. But in this case, it wasn't. This will be really huge, not only for ourselves, but for future generations to enjoy these outdoor places and to protect more of them. So thanks, Kate and Bridget, for hosting us, for having this conversation. And I'll turn it over to you for any last minute closing thoughts you guys have.
Steve, as you know, we sort of always end these conversations, and we're going to do a little bit. We've got another event we want to highlight for our guests, but before we let you go, you know, we've got a ton of people on tonight who took an hour out of their evening because they care so much about this. What is the one thing maybe that all of our guests can do to make sure that we get this over the finish line and that we're standing up for our public lands? Do you have like a great piece of advice for them?
Sure. I actually have two tips. One is on the political front, make a phone call to your member of Congress and tell them you love the great outdoors and tell them to pass the Great American Outdoors Act. Again, it has already passed the Senate, so it would be a phone call to your U.S. representative. That's tip number one. And then tip number two is not political, which is get out and enjoy the outdoors. It's a special place, and it reminds all of us of how much we want to protect this and how valuable it is to all of us.
And if you had a rep on tonight, send them a thank you, give them a call or an email and say, I got to see your video. Thank you so much for your support. I am going to let Bridget do a plug for an event we have coming up, but I just want to, again, thank everyone and encourage you all, if you liked what you heard, check out Environment America, check out the websites for Latino Outdoors and Gateway to the Great Outdoors to see more of their work. All of us are on social media. Follow all the organizations. And Bridget, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about a great way to appreciate our public lands.
Yeah, so Steve kind of teed this up perfectly, but we at Environment America are running a Camping Together event tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Central Time. I think Kate will go ahead and put the landing page if you want to RSVP in the chat. We're all just going to come together and camp together, but separately. So if that involves camping in your backyard or actually going out to a campground in LWCF area, or even in your living room, which is probably what I'm going to end up doing because I don't have a backyard for that. And yeah, we'll start off the Camping Together with a nice virtual fire, and we've got activities. So if you want to enjoy the outdoors and you want to camp, please, by all means, RSVP to the landing page. And I am just going to say thank you, everybody, for coming to the Great American Outdoors Rally. We appreciate all the representatives and the senator who have supported this along the way, and we're really hoping for a big victory here. Kate, anything else?
Thank you to our state directors who came on, Steve and Alex. Thank you, Albert and Nadav, for coming on and sharing your work. If you all have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us, and have a wonderful night enjoying the great outdoors.